The text message appeared on my phone screen as the taxi pulled away from Seattle Grace Medical Center. 28 days I'd been fighting post-surgical complications. 28 days of fever, infection, and fear. And now, finally discharged, I was going home. The message was from my daughter, Natalie. "Mom, we need to talk when you get here." Things have changed. I stared at those words, a cold feeling settling in my chest despite the warmth of the late August afternoon. Things have changed. What could that possibly mean? The house came into view, the craftsman-style home that my late husband David and I had spent 35 years restoring. Room by room, memory by memory. The ivy still climbed the brick facade. The maple tree David planted when Natalie was born still shaded the front lawn. But when I reached the front door, keys in my trembling hand, Natalie opened it before I could unlock it. And she didn't smile. "Mom," she said, blocking the entrance. Behind her, I could see movement. People I didn't expect. Her husband, Marcus. And were those his parents? "Natalie, sweetheart, I'm exhausted. You can't come in." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, nearly losing my balance. My hip, still healing from the replacement surgery that had led to all these complications, sent a sharp warning through my body. "What did you say?" "Things changed while you were in the hospital. This house isn't yours anymore. You need to find somewhere else to live." I stood there on my own porch, discharge papers crumpling in my pocket, staring at my only child, the daughter I'd raised alone after David's sudden death from an aneurysm 12 years ago, the girl I'd put through college by working double shifts at the university library, the woman whose wedding I'd paid for, whose first house down payment I'd covered, whose life I'd supported in 1,000 visible and invisible ways. "Natalie, this is my home. Our home." "What are you talking about?" Marcus appeared beside her, his hand on her shoulder in a gesture that looked protective but felt possessive. "Mrs. Monroe, perhaps it's better if we explain inside, briefly. They let me into my own home like I was a stranger requesting entry. The living room had changed. Small things, but enough to disorient me. My reading chair was gone. The photos of David and me that had lined the mantel were missing. In their place sat framed pictures of Marcus's family, people I barely knew. "Sit down, Mom," Natalie said, gesturing to the couch. Not my couch anymore, apparently. Just the couch. Marcus's parents emerged from the kitchen. Howard and Patricia Thornton. I'd met them perhaps 5 times in the 3 years Natalie and Marcus had been married. Howard was a real estate developer with cold eyes and an calculating smile. Patricia was a former lawyer who'd made a career of finding loopholes. "Catherine," Patricia said with false warmth, "we're so glad you're feeling better." "What's happening here?" I asked, my voice stronger than I felt. "Why are you in my house?" "That's what we need to discuss," Howard said, settling into David's old armchair, the one piece of furniture I'd refused to replace after he died. "While you were hospitalized, we made some arrangements. Legal arrangements." The room tilted slightly. "What kind of arrangements?" Natalie wouldn't meet my eyes. Marcus did the talking, pulling out a folder of documents. "Before your surgery, you signed power of attorney papers. Do you remember?" I did remember. Vaguely. Natalie had brought them to me the night before the procedure, saying they were just medical decision forms in case something went wrong during surgery. I'd been anxious, medicated for pre-op preparation, trusting my daughter completely. "Those weren't just medical powers of attorney," Marcus continued. "They included financial authority. And we've used that authority to transfer ownership of this property." "Transfer?" The word felt foreign in my mouth. "To whom?" "To us," Patricia said simply. "Howard and I needed to relocate from Portland. This house is perfect for our needs. More importantly, the neighborhood is about to undergo significant redevelopment. The property value will triple in the next 2 years. I looked at Natalie. You sold my house? While I was unconscious in the ICU? We didn't sell it, she said quietly. We transferred it, and we're doing what's best for everyone. Mom, you're 70 years old. You can't maintain a house this size alone. We're helping you. Helping me? My voice rose despite my exhaustion. By stealing my home? Don't be dramatic, Patricia interjected. We've packed your personal belongings. They're in the garage. We can arrange to have them sent wherever you decide to stay. This couldn't be real. This had to be some fever dream, some medication-induced hallucination. But the pain in my hip was very real. The exhaustion in my bones was real, and the coldness in my daughter's eyes. That was devastatingly, horrifyingly real. This is illegal, I said. You can't just take someone's house. Howard smiled that terrible smile. Actually, Mrs. Monroe, we can. And we did. The transfer was completely legal, executed under valid power of attorney. Our lawyers have reviewed everything thoroughly. Then I'll get my own lawyer. You're welcome to try, Patricia said, but legal battles take time and money. Do you have the resources for a prolonged court fight? The truth was, I didn't. Not immediately. My savings had been depleted by years of helping Natalie, by medical bills David's insurance hadn't covered, by the cost of living alone on a librarian's pension. Natalie, I said, focusing on my daughter, how could you do this? For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt? Regret? But Marcus's hand tightened on her shoulder, and whatever emotion I'd glimpsed disappeared. Mom, you're being unreasonable. We're offering you a solution. We've researched several nice assisted living facilities. I don't need assisted living. I need my home. That's not possible anymore, Howard said flatly. The decision is made. We'd appreciate it if you'd leave peacefully. I looked around at the house David and I had built our lives in, the kitchen where we'd cooked countless dinners, the window seat where I'd read to Natalie every night, the garden visible through the back windows where David had proposed all those decades ago. And I looked at these strangers, because that's what they were now, strangers wearing familiar faces, who had taken it all. Something crystallized inside me, not tears, not defeat, something harder, colder, sharper. Fine, I said, standing slowly. I'll leave. They looked surprised by my compliance. They shouldn't have been. They should have remembered that I'd spent 40 years in university library systems, including a decade in special collections, handling rare books and manuscripts worth millions. They should have remembered that I'd managed complex archival systems, tracked provenance, documented authenticity. They should have remembered that I knew exactly how to research, how to investigate, how to build an airtight case. The garage, I said. My things are in the garage? Yes, Natalie said quickly. We've been very careful with everything. I walked through my house one more time, memorizing it, not as a victim saying goodbye, but as someone cataloging evidence. The new locks on David's study, the fresh paint covering the pencil marks where we'd measured Natalie's height every birthday, the subtle changes that spoke of planning, of preparation, of a conspiracy that had been months in the making. In the garage, I found my possessions crammed into cheap cardboard boxes, my clothes, David's few remaining things I'd kept, photo albums, personal documents, and there, thank God, was my laptop and my phone charger. I'll need a few days to arrange accommodation, I said, pulling out my phone. I assume I can stay at a hotel? Of course, Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. They'd expected more resistance. They'd expected tears and pleading. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I called a taxi and loaded 3 boxes into it, the essentials I'd need immediately. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house one final time. New destination? The driver asked. The Fairmont Hotel downtown, I said, and then I need to make a call. The call was to Julia Reeves, my closest friend for 30 years. Julia, who'd retired from the FBI's white-collar crime division 5 years ago. Julia, who'd told me more than once that if I ever needed help, she knew people. "Catherine?" Julia answered on the second ring. "I thought you were still in the hospital." "I was discharged today. Julia, I need your help, and I need you to call in every favor you've ever been owed." This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. The hotel room was impersonal, but clean. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hip throbbing from the stress of the day, and waited for Julia to arrive. She knocked exactly 30 minutes after my call. When I opened the door, she took one look at my face and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. Every detail, from the pre-surgery papers to the cold dismissal, from the Thorntons' presence to Natalie's betrayal. Julia listened without interrupting, her FBI training evident in how she processed information. When I finished, she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling Daniel Chen. He's the best asset recovery attorney in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm calling my former partner at the FBI. If there's fraud here, and Catherine, there absolutely is fraud here, we're going to find it. Julia, I don't have the money for—" "Catherine Monroe, you housed me for 3 months when my divorce left me homeless. You helped me through my mother's death. You've been there for every crisis in my life. Do you really think I'm going to let you handle this alone?" For the first time since reading Natalie's text message, I let myself feel something other than shock and rage. I felt gratitude. "Besides," Julia continued with a grim smile, "something about this situation doesn't add up. The Thorntons aren't just opportunistic. This was planned, coordinated. People don't just casually steal a house. There's something bigger happening here." Daniel Chen arrived within the hour, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly pension. But his handshake was warm, his voice genuinely concerned. "Mrs. Monroe, Julia's given me the basic outline. I need to see those power of attorney documents. Do you have copies?" "No. I never saw them after signing. I thought they were just medical forms." "That's the first red flag," he said, pulling out a legal pad. "Informed consent requires understanding what you're signing. If they misrepresented the document's purpose, that's fraud." "Even if the signatures are valid?" I asked. "Especially then. A valid signature obtained through deception is still fraud." He began making notes. "Tell me about your relationship with your daughter before the surgery. Any financial disputes? Disagreements about the house?" I thought back carefully. "Nothing significant. She'd occasionally mention that the house was too big for me alone, that I should consider downsizing, but it was always framed as concern for my well-being, not—" I stopped, understanding dawning. She was conditioning me, making it seem normal to think about leaving. Julia nodded. "Classic manipulation. And the Thorntons, how well do you know them?" "Barely. They live in Portland. We've met at holidays, major events. They always seemed calculating, but I attributed that to Howard being in real estate." "Real estate," Daniel repeated, his pen pausing. "Julia, didn't you work a case about 10 years ago involving predatory real estate practices in the Portland area?" Julia's expression sharpened. "The Riverside development scandal. Developers were systematically identifying elderly homeowners in appreciating neighborhoods, manipulating them into signing away properties. It was never fully prosecuted. The main players fled before we could build a solid case." "Catherine," Daniel said carefully. You mentioned the Thorntons said this neighborhood is about to undergo redevelopment, that property values will triple. Yes, Patricia specifically mentioned it. Julia and Daniel exchanged significant looks. That's not something most people would know unless they had inside information, Julia said. Let me make some calls. Daniel, can you start the legal proceedings to challenge the transfer? Already composing the emergency motion. But Catherine, I'll be honest, even with clear fraud, getting immediate possession back will be difficult. The Thorntons have physical control of the property, and courts move slowly. How slowly? Weeks, maybe months? The thought of the Thorntons living in my house, sleeping in bedrooms David and I had shared, for months made my stomach turn. But I'd spent decades cataloging patients in rare book collections. I could be patient now. What do I need to do? I asked. First, a full medical evaluation, Daniel said. We need documentation of your mental competence when you sign those papers. Were you on medications that might have impaired your judgment? I was on pre-surgical anxiety medication and pain management for my hip. Perfect. That's evidence of diminished capacity. Second, we need your financial records, all of them. Bank statements, investment accounts, everything. I pulled out my laptop. I have everything backed up on cloud storage. David insisted on meticulous records. As I logged in and began pulling up files, Julia's phone rang. She stepped away to answer it, her expression growing increasingly intent. When she returned, her face was grim. That was my contact at the Portland FBI field office. Howard Thornton is on their radar, has been for 5 years. They suspect him of running a sophisticated elder exploitation ring, but they haven't been able to prove it. An exploitation ring? The words felt surreal. Targeting wealthy seniors, particularly widows, in gentrifying neighborhoods. The pattern is always the same. Establish a family connection through marriage or friendship, gain access to legal documents, transfer property just before major development announcements. But how would they know about development plans before they're public? Daniel asked. That's what the FBI can't prove. Someone's leaking information, someone in city planning or development. But the Thorntons are careful. They use different shell companies, different lawyers, never leave a clear trail. I felt like I was in a thriller novel, not my real life. So, Natalie, your daughter, Julia said gently, was their access point. I'm sorry, Catherine, but Marcus didn't marry Natalie by chance. They targeted her because of you. The pain of that realization was worse than any surgical complication. My daughter's marriage, which I'd believed was love, had been a calculated move in a property scheme. There's more, Julia continued. My contact mentioned there have been other victims in Seattle in the past 2 years. Elderly homeowners who suddenly signed over properties to the Thorntons or associated entities. Most were too ashamed or confused to fight back. How many others? I asked quietly. At least 4 they know about. Probably more who never reported it. Daniel was already typing on his tablet. This changes everything. If we can connect your case to a pattern of fraud, we're not just fighting for your house. We're building a RICO case. RICO? I asked. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. If the Thorntons are running an organized scheme, they face federal charges, asset forfeiture, serious prison time. I looked at these 2 people who dropped everything to help me, who believed me, who saw the injustice of what had been done, and I made a decision. I want to help, I said, not just get my house back, but stop them from doing this to anyone else. Julia smiled grimly. That's my Catherine. Now let's talk strategy. Daniel will handle the legal side, challenging the property transfer, documenting the fraud. I'll work with the FBI to build the criminal case. But Catherine, there's something you can do that neither of us can. What? Go undercover. I blinked. I'm 70 years old with a healing hip replacement. How exactly would I go undercover? Play the victim. Let them think you've accepted defeat. The Thorntons and Natalie believe you're powerless. Use that. If they think you're not a threat, they'll get careless. And when they get careless, they'll give us the evidence we need. It was audacious. It was risky. It required me to face my daughter and pretend I didn't know what she'd done, what she'd helped do to me and others. But I'd spent 4 weeks in a hospital fighting for my life. I'd stood on my own porch and been turned away. I'd lost my home, my sense of safety, my trust in my only child. If pretending to be defeated would bring them down, I could do that. Tell me what you need me to do, I said. Over the next 3 hours, we planned. Daniel would file emergency legal motions but wouldn't push too aggressively. We wanted the Thorntons comfortable, not alarmed. Julia would coordinate with the FBI, gathering evidence from other victims, building the case. And I would reach out to Natalie, play the hurt but resigned mother, see what information I could gather. They'll probably offer you something, Daniel warned. Maybe a small settlement, maybe help finding an apartment. Whatever they offer, take it. It'll seem like compliance, but also document their guilt. They'll be paying you off for a theft they're pretending is legal. And watch for any documentation they want you to sign, Julia added. Recording everything. The laws in Washington allow single-party consent for recordings. Your phone, a hidden recorder, whatever works. We need them admitting to the scheme in their own words. At midnight, they finally left. I sat alone in my hotel room, looking at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I looked older than I felt. The hospitalization had taken its toll. I'd lost weight, gained new lines around my eyes, acquired a permanent weariness. But underneath, I was still Catherine Monroe, still the woman who'd rebuilt her life after David's death, still the librarian who'd tracked down a stolen medieval manuscript through patient, methodical research, still the mother who'd raised a daughter alone. And now, I'd be the woman who took down a criminal enterprise. I texted Natalie. Simple, resigned. Can we talk tomorrow? I need help figuring out next steps. Her response came immediately. Of course, Mom. I'm glad you're being reasonable. Lunch at noon? Reasonable. The word stung. But I replied with a sad emoji and an agreement. Phase 1 of Operation Takedown, as Julia had melodramatically named it, was about to begin. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for clothes with a purpose. Not my usual practical style, but softer, more vulnerable looking. Cardigans in pale colors. Comfortable shoes that emphasized my age rather than hiding it. Reading glasses on a chain, the visual markers of a defeated elderly woman. Julia met me at the hotel before lunch. You look perfect, she said approvingly. Harmless, resigned. They'll eat it up. She helped me test the recording app on my phone, making sure it would catch conversation even in a busy restaurant. Remember, she coached, you're hurt but trying to understand. Ask questions. Let them explain their reasoning. People love to justify themselves. They'll tell you more than they realize. Natalie had chosen a small cafe near the university district where I'd worked for decades. Neutral territory, but also a subtle reminder of my old life, my old powerlessness. She was already there when I arrived, looking concerned and caring. The perfect daughter worried about her aging mother. Mom, she said, standing to hug me, you look tired. How are you feeling? I let myself lean on her slightly, playing up my physical weakness. It's been hard, I admitted. True enough. I didn't sleep well in the hotel. I'm so sorry about all this. I know it seems sudden, but Marcus and I really think this is best for you. We ordered. Soup and tea for me, emphasizing frugality and age. As we waited for food, I asked the question Daniel had coached me on. I don't understand how the transfer happened so quickly. Usually, real estate transactions take weeks. Natalie shifted slightly. Well, Howard knows people. He was able to expedite things. Knows people? I let confusion show. What does that mean? Oh, just connections in the property office. Being in real estate development, he has ways to speed up paperwork. I filed that away. Connections in the property office. Corruption, in other words. And the house, I continued softly. Why that house specifically? Howard and Patricia must have their own home in Portland. They're relocating. Marcus's practice is expanding to Seattle, so it made sense for his parents to be nearby. But why my house? Why not buy something? Natalie looked uncomfortable. Mom, can we not do this? What's done is done. Let's focus on finding you a nice place. I just want to understand. I kept my voice small, hurt but not angry. Did I do something wrong? Did I not take care of it well enough? No, Mom, it's not that. She reached across the table, taking my hand. The gesture felt practiced, empty. It's just that you're at an age where you need support. And the house has value that can be better utilized. Value. I repeated the word. Patricia mentioned something about property values tripling. How does she know that? Natalie's hand twitched slightly. She just meant generally. Seattle real estate is always appreciating, but her eyes had flickered away when she answered. She was lying and not very well. Our food arrived. As we ate, I pivoted to the question I most dreaded but most needed to ask. When did you and Marcus start planning this? Planning? Mom, we're not... Natalie. I let pain show in my voice. Real pain. Please don't lie to me. I'm your mother. I know you. This didn't happen in the 3 weeks I was hospitalized. This took months, didn't it? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was defensive. Marcus's parents suggested it about 6 months ago. They pointed out that you were getting older, that the house was becoming a burden. They offered to help. 6 months. Before my surgery was even scheduled. They'd been planning this while I was still healthy, still independent. And you agreed? Just like that? It wasn't just like that. We discussed it. Marcus and I have our own financial pressures, Mom. His practice isn't doing as well as we hoped. Howard and Patricia offered to help us if we helped them. There it was. The admission that this was a transaction. Help them steal my house, and they'd help Natalie financially. How much did they pay you? I asked quietly. Mom, it's not... How much, Natalie? They're covering Marcus's practice debts. About $80,000. And they're going to help us buy a condo. My daughter had sold her mother's home for $80,000 and a promise of future help. The pain of it was almost physical. But I kept my face composed. Sad but understanding. I see. And the house is worth? The appraisal said $300,000. I knew for a fact it was worth at least $500,000, probably more. The Thorntons had undervalued it to make the transfer seem less suspicious. And Natalie, desperate or greedy or both, had gone along with it. What happens now? I asked. For me, I mean... Howard and Patricia have researched some assisted living facilities, nice places. One even has a library volunteer program you might enjoy. They'd already planned where to put me. Out of sight, out of mind, in an institution where I'd be surrounded by people with actual cognitive decline, where my protests would seem like confusion rather than truth. Can I see the house one more time? I asked, to say goodbye properly. Natalie looked uncertain. I don't know if that's a good idea. Please, I just need closure. One afternoon to walk through and remember. Then I promise I'll move forward. She considered it. Let me talk to Marcus and his parents. Thank you, I said, squeezing her hand. You're a good daughter. The lie tasted bitter, but I saw her relax. She believed I was accepting this. She believed I was weak. After lunch, I returned to the hotel and immediately called Julia and Daniel. She admitted it, I told them, playing the recording. The Thorntons paid them to help steal the house. 6 months of planning, and they've done this before. She mentioned they're helping Natalie and Marcus buy a condo, which means they have money from previous schemes. Daniel was already making notes. This is good. This is very good. The admission of payment for facilitating the transfer is evidence of fraud. And if we can prove the condo purchase is connected to previous thefts— I'm on it, Julia interrupted. My FBI contact is pulling records of all property transfers the Thorntons have been involved in for the past 5 years. We're looking for patterns: undervalued sales, quick transfers, elderly sellers who later had financial troubles. Natalie's trying to arrange for me to visit the house, I told them. One last walkthrough. Perfect, Julia said. Catherine, I want you to wear a camera. Small, discreet. We need footage of the house, any changes they've made, any documents or evidence lying around. And we need you to engage them in conversation. Get Howard or Patricia talking about their plans for the property. How do I do that without seeming suspicious? Play sentimental. You're saying goodbye to the house you shared with David. Ask about their renovation plans. People can't resist talking about their successes. They'll brag. And when they brag, they'll incriminate themselves. That afternoon, Natalie called back. Sunday afternoon, you can visit for an hour, but Mom, please understand this is a courtesy. Don't make it harder than it has to be. I understand, I said meekly. I just need to say goodbye. Sunday? 3 days away. 3 days to prepare, to gather strength, to ready myself for what would likely be the most difficult performance of my life. That evening, alone in the hotel room, I let myself cry for the first time since this began, not from weakness, from grief. The daughter I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The home I'd built was inhabited by strangers. The life I'd thought was secure had been revealed as fragile, easily stolen. But through the tears, I felt that cold determination solidifying. They'd underestimated me. They'd seen a 70-year-old widow with a healing hip and assumed I'd be easy prey. They'd forgotten that librarians are researchers, that we're trained to find truth hidden in thousands of pages of noise, that we're patient, methodical, and utterly ruthless when it comes to tracking down stolen property. David used to joke that I'd have made a terrifying detective. He had no idea how right he was. Sunday morning, Julia arrived at my hotel with a small gift box. Inside was what looked like a simple brooch, elegant, appropriate for a woman my age, completely innocuous. Camera and microphone, she explained. Latest FBI tech, 8-hour battery, streams directly to my phone. I'll be parked down the street recording everything. Part 2. I pinned the brooch to my cardigan, my hands steadier than I expected. How do I look? Like someone's sweet, harmless grandmother, Julia said approvingly. Exactly what we need. Remember, you're there to say goodbye and gather evidence. Don't confront them. Don't let on that you know anything. Just observe, record, and get out safely. And if things go wrong, I'll be listening to every word. If I sense any danger, I'm calling in backup immediately. The Seattle PD has been briefed. They're ready to respond if needed. At 1 o'clock, I stood on the porch of my house for the second time since my discharge. This time, Natalie opened the door with a sad smile. Thanks for being understanding about this, Mom. I know it's hard. It's my home, I said simply, letting the weight of that truth hang in the air. Of course it's hard. The Thorntons were waiting in the living room. My living room, though every trace of my personality had been stripped away. Patricia sat in David's chair like she owned it, because legally she did. Catherine, Howard said, standing to shake my hand, we appreciate you being so mature about this situation. Many people in your position would have made things very difficult. What choice do I have? I asked, channeling genuine bitterness into my voice. "You have lawyers. You have the legal documents. I'm just an old woman who can't afford to fight." I saw satisfaction flash in his eyes. He liked thinking I was defeated. "It's for the best. This house requires maintenance you can't provide at your age, and frankly, the property is wasted on a single occupant." Wasted. I let the words sink in, looking around at the walls David and I had painted, the floors we'd refinished together. "I suppose you're right. I was just taking up space." "Now, Mom, don't be like that," Natalie interjected. "We're trying to help." "I know, sweetheart. I know." I moved slowly through the living room, touching surfaces, remembering. The hidden camera in my brooch captured everything: the expensive new furniture, the removal of family photos, the subtle changes that spoke of ownership transferred. "What are your plans for the house?" I asked, turning to Howard. "Will you sell it or keep it?" "Oh, we'll keep it for now," he said, unable to resist explaining his cleverness. "The neighborhood is about to undergo significant redevelopment. The city council is approving a mixed-use zoning change next month. Property values will skyrocket." "Next month?" I repeated, feigning innocent confusion. "But how do you know that? I thought zoning changes took years." Patricia's smile was sharp. "Howard has excellent sources in city planning. He's always ahead of the curve in real estate opportunities." There it was, admission of insider information. The camera caught it all. "That must be very profitable," I said, "knowing things before other people do." "It's called being smart," Howard replied, his ego clearly engaged now. "While others wait for public announcements, I position myself strategically. It's how I built my business." "How many properties have you acquired this way?" I asked, genuinely curious now. He smiled, actually proud of himself. "In the Seattle area? Your house is our 5th strategic acquisition in 2 years, all in neighborhoods about to appreciate significantly. It's a system that works beautifully. 5 properties in 2 years, 5 families like mine, dispossessed, manipulated, stolen from. And the previous owners," I asked carefully, "did they understand what was happening?" Patricia's expression cooled slightly. "That's not really your concern, Catherine. But if you must know, they all signed appropriate legal documents, just like you did." "Documents they understood?" I pressed gently. "They signed them," Howard said flatly. "That's what matters legally." I nodded slowly, letting him think I was simply making conversation. "May I see the upstairs? David's study?" Natalie hesitated. "Mom, I'm not sure." "Please. Just for a few minutes. I need to see where he worked." They exchanged glances, but agreed. Natalie walked with me up the stairs I'd climbed thousands of times. Each step hurt my healing hip, but I pushed through the pain. David's study was nearly unrecognizable. His bookshelves had been cleared, his desk replaced with modern furniture. But on the new desk, I spotted something that made my heart race. A folder with Seattle properties written on the tab. "Would you give me a moment alone?" I asked Natalie. "Just to remember him?" "Mom, please, I need this." She left reluctantly, pulling the door closed. I moved quickly despite my hip, using my phone to photograph every document in that folder. Property deeds, transfer documents, bank statements showing large deposits, communications with someone at the city planning office whose name I made sure to capture clearly. 5 minutes. That's all I had before Natalie would return. I photographed everything I could, my hands shaking with adrenaline and rage. When Natalie opened the door again, I was standing at the window, looking out at the garden. Perfectly harmless, perfectly defeated. "Thank you," I said quietly. "I'm ready to go now." As we descended the stairs, I paused in the hallway, looking at family photos that had been relegated to a small side table. "May I take one of these?" "Of David and me?" "Of course," Patricia said, her tone magnanimous now that she thought she'd won. "Take whatever personal items you'd like." I selected a photo from our 20th anniversary. We looked so happy, so secure in our future together. We'd had no idea how fragile that security was, how easily it could be stolen. At the door, Marcus appeared, having been absent during most of my visit. He looked uncomfortable, unable to meet my eyes. "Marcus," I said gently, "I hope you'll be happy here." "Mrs. Monroe, He started, then stopped. "Thank you for understanding." "Oh, I understand," I replied, letting multiple meanings layer that statement. "I understand perfectly." Outside, I walked slowly to the waiting taxi, every step captured by Julia's surveillance. Only when the car pulled away did I let my shoulders sag with relief and exhaustion. My phone buzzed immediately. "Julia." "Catherine, you were incredible. We got everything. Howard admitting to insider trading, Patricia's confession about previous victims, and those documents you photographed, they're exactly what we need." I closed my eyes, leaning back against the seat. What happens now? Now we finish building the case, and then we take these people down so hard they never see daylight outside a federal prison again. Back at the hotel, Julia had her laptop set up with split screens showing footage from the brooch camera and the documents I'd photographed. Daniel joined us within 30 minutes, his expression growing increasingly satisfied as he reviewed everything. "This is gold," he said, "absolute prosecutorial gold. The admission of 5 properties acquired through insider trading and potential fraud. That's RICO territory. The documents showing communications with a city planning official, that's corruption. The understated property values, that's tax fraud." "How long before we can act?" I asked. "The FBI wants 48 hours to coordinate with the IRS and the Seattle PD," Julia said. "They're building simultaneous cases, criminal charges against the Thorntons, investigation of the city official, and recovery of all properties fraudulently obtained." "And my house?" Daniel smiled. "Will be returned to you with an emergency court order. Once fraud is proven, the transfer is void. You'll be back home within a week." "What about Natalie?" I asked, the question I'd been dreading. "Will she face charges?" Julia and Daniel exchanged looks. "That's complicated," Daniel said carefully. "She was involved, but the extent of her knowledge and participation determines her culpability. She could face charges as an accessory to fraud, or she could cooperate as a witness. She'll have to make a choice," Julia added gently. "Stand with the Thorntons and face prosecution, or tell the truth and potentially receive immunity." I nodded slowly. "Either way, our relationship will never be the same." "No," Julia agreed. "It won't." "I'm sorry, Catherine. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, but from a strange mixture of anticipation and grief. Justice was coming. I could feel it. But justice wouldn't restore what had been truly stolen. My trust in my daughter, my sense of family, my belief that the people I loved would protect me rather than prey on me. The next morning, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Mrs. Monroe." "My name is Elizabeth Hartley. I'm calling because I heard you might be taking action against Howard and Patricia Thornton." I sat up straighter. "How did you hear that?" "I have a friend at the FBI, Mrs. Monroe. I'm one of their victims. 2 years ago, they took my house in the exact same way they took yours. I was too ashamed to fight back, too afraid. But if you're building a case, I want to help." Within an hour, Elizabeth was at my hotel room, Julia beside me. Elizabeth was 73, a former nurse, her hands trembling as she told her story. "My son married Marcus Thornton's cousin," she began. "That's how they got access to me. When I needed surgery, hip replacement like you, they had me sign papers. I thought I was signing healthcare directives. 3 weeks later, I was evicted from the house I'd lived in for 40 years. "Did you try to fight back?" Julia asked gently. "I consulted a lawyer, but the Thorntons threatened to drag it out, to bankrupt me with legal fees. And my son—" Her voice broke. "My son chose his wife's family over me. I gave up. I moved into a tiny apartment and tried to forget. Until now," I said, taking her hand. "Until now. Mrs. Monroe, if you're standing up to them, I want to stand with you. I want my story told. I want justice." By that afternoon, Julia had located 2 more victims. Margaret Torres, 81, who'd lost her home in a similar scheme 18 months ago, and Robert Chen, 68, whose son had married into the Thornton network and facilitated the theft of his property. We gathered in my hotel room, 5 people who'd been victimized by the same family, the same scheme, the same combination of manipulation and legal theft. "There are probably more," Julia said, her FBI instincts engaged. "These are just the ones we've found quickly. The Thorntons have been operating for at least 5 years. Who knows how many families they've destroyed?" Daniel, who joined us, was taking notes furiously. "Each of you will need to provide detailed statements. Medical records from your surgeries, documentation of the papers you signed, evidence of property transfers. We're building a class action in addition to the criminal case." "What are our chances?" Robert asked. "Realistically? With what we have now?" Daniel smiled grimly. "They're going to prison, all of them, and every property they stole will be returned." That evening, my phone rang. Natalie. "Mom, can we talk?" In person. There was something different in her voice. Fear, guilt. "All right," I said carefully. "The hotel restaurant." 1 hour. I alerted Julia immediately, who repositioned her surveillance to cover the restaurant. The brooch camera was cleaned and checked. I was ready. Natalie arrived exactly on time, but she looked different. No makeup. Hair pulled back simply, eyes red from crying. "Mom," she said, sliding into the booth across from me, "I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." "Marcus and I are in trouble. Big trouble. The FBI came to his office yesterday. They started asking questions about his parents' business dealings, about property transfers, about you." I kept my face neutral. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. They said they'd be back with subpoenas." She looked at me directly for the first time in days. "Mom, what's happening?" "What's happening," I said calmly, "is that your in-laws are criminals, and you helped them steal my house as part of a much larger criminal enterprise." She flinched. "I didn't know." "You knew enough. You knew it was wrong. You knew I didn't understand what I was signing. You knew Howard and Patricia had done this before. But I thought it was legal. They have lawyers. They said everything was proper." "Natalie." I cut through her excuses. "You sold your mother's home for $80,000 and the promise of a condo. Whether you understood the full scope of their operation or not, you knew you were betraying me." Tears streamed down her face now. "I'm so sorry, Mom." "Marcus convinced me we had no choice. His practice was failing. We were drowning in debt, and his parents offered to help if we helped them. I was desperate." "So you chose money over your mother?" "I chose survival. Or at least I thought I did. But now—" She pulled out her phone, showing me a text message. "Howard and Patricia's lawyer called Marcus today. They're cutting ties with us, leaving us to face whatever investigation is coming alone." I read the message, cold and legal, basically telling Natalie and Marcus they were on their own. The Thorntons were protecting themselves, abandoning the children they'd used as pawns. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly. "I want to fix this. I want to tell the truth. Mom, I'll testify against them. I'll tell the FBI everything I know. Just please—" Her voice broke completely. "Please don't let me lose you completely. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but you're all the family I have." I sat back, studying my daughter, the girl I'd raised, the woman who'd betrayed me, the person who was now finally facing the consequences of her choices. "I can't make any promises about our future relationship," I said finally. "That will take time. Years, probably, but if you're willing to tell the truth, all of it, I'll speak to the FBI. I'll tell them you're cooperating." "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Mom." "Don't thank me yet. Cooperation doesn't mean immunity from consequences. You may still face charges." "I know, but at least I'll be telling the truth. Finally." After she left, I sat alone in the restaurant for a long time. Julia appeared, sliding into the booth Natalie had vacated. "I heard everything," she said. "She's scared. And probably genuine about wanting to make amends. But she's also desperate. Be careful, Catherine. People say things when they're cornered that they don't mean when they're safe again." "I know. But Julia, she's still my daughter. Somewhere under the bad decisions and the greed, she's still the girl I raised. Maybe. We'll see." The FBI raid happened on a Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. I wasn't there. Julia insisted I stay at the hotel for safety, but she called me with updates as events unfolded. "They're arresting Howard at his temporary office," she reported. "Patricia at your house, and the city planning official who's been leaking information, a man named Gerald Winters, at his home." "What about Marcus?" "Not arrested yet. The FBI wants his cooperation first. Same with Natalie. They're being brought in for questioning. I spent the day in my hotel room alternating between watching news coverage. The story broke big. Real estate developer arrested in multi-state fraud scheme, and waiting for updates from Julia and Daniel. By evening, the picture was clear. Howard and Patricia Thornton were facing 73 charges between them, including racketeering, fraud, elder abuse, conspiracy, and corruption. Gerald Winters, the city official, faced his own slate of corruption and bribery charges. 8 properties in the Seattle area had been identified as fraudulently obtained. The total value exceeded $4 million. Victims ranged in age from 65 to 84. "And Natalie?" I asked Daniel when he called with the final update. "She's cooperating fully. So is Marcus. They've provided detailed information about the Thorntons' operations, documents they had access to, conversations they overheard. In exchange, the prosecutor is offering deferred prosecution. They'll face probation and community service, but no prison time if they complete the terms successfully. That seems lenient. It's strategic. Their testimony strengthens the case against the Thorntons significantly, and frankly, they were manipulated almost as much as the victims were. The Thorntons used them as accomplices but never made them full partners. They were tools, not criminals. I understood the logic, but it still felt incomplete. Natalie had made choices. She'd chosen betrayal. That she was now choosing truth didn't erase that original choice. "When can I go home?" I asked. "The emergency order returning the property to you was signed an hour ago. You can move back in tomorrow if you'd like. The Thorntons' possessions will be removed by court order. Home." I could go home. The next morning, Julia drove me to my house. A sheriff's deputy met us at the door, handing me my own keys like they were something precious I'd lost and found again. "Ma'am, the property has been secured. All unauthorized occupants have been removed. It's yours again." I walked through the door I'd been barred from just 2 weeks earlier. The house felt different. Violated, changed, but also familiar. Mine. In the living room, my reading chair had been returned to its place. The photos of David were back on the mantel. My belongings, which had been boxed in the garage, were carefully arranged throughout the house by what I later learned was a victim services team Julia had arranged. I walked through each room slowly, reclaiming it. David's study, where his books were back on the shelves. Our bedroom, where our wedding photo once again sat on the nightstand. The kitchen, where my mother's recipe cards had been recovered from the trash and cleaned, placed in a small box on the counter. "Home," I whispered, touching the familiar surfaces. "I'm home." Julia stood in the doorway, giving me space to process. The FBI recovered most of what the Thorntons took. Some things were sold, but they're tracking those down too. And Catherine, she held up a folder. "This came for you." From the other victims. Inside were letters. Elizabeth, Margaret, Robert, and 4 others I hadn't met yet, all thanking me for standing up, for fighting back, for giving them hope that justice was possible. "They want to form a support group," Julia explained, "for people who've been victimized by family. They're calling it Reclaimed." I smiled at the name. That's perfect. That evening, I sat on my back porch watching the sun set over the garden David and I had planted. Everything was as it should be. The roses needed pruning. They'd been neglected during the Thorntons' occupation, but they were alive, surviving despite the abandonment, like me. My phone rang. Natalie. I hesitated, then answered. "Mom, I heard you're back in the house." "I'm glad. Thank you." A long pause. Then, "Can I see you sometime?" "Not yet, I know. But someday." I looked out at the garden, at the life David and I had built, at the home I'd fought to reclaim. "Someday," I agreed, "but Natalie, it won't be the same. We can't go back to what was." "I know, I don't deserve to go back to what was. But maybe we could build something new, something honest." "Maybe," I said. And in that maybe, I left room for possibility. Not forgiveness yet, but hope. The trial took 8 months to complete. I testified, as did Elizabeth, Margaret, Robert, and 12 other victims the FBI had identified. Natalie and Marcus testified too, their statements providing crucial details about the Thorntons' methods. Howard Thornton received 25 years in federal prison. Patricia received 20 years. Gerald Winters, the corrupt city official, got 15. Multiple shell companies were dissolved, assets were seized, and restitution was ordered for all victims. My house was officially, legally, undeniably mine again. But more than that, the testimony and evidence from the case led to reforms in power of attorney laws, requiring witnesses and video documentation when elderly people signed property transfers. The case became known as the Thornton Fraud Network, studied in law schools and FBI training programs as an example of sophisticated elder exploitation. Natalie and Marcus completed their probation. They divorced 18 months after the trial, the strain of what had happened proving too much for their marriage. Natalie moved to Oregon, working as a paralegal for a legal aid organization helping low-income seniors. We spoke occasionally, carefully, slowly rebuilding something that would never be what it was, but might, eventually, be something real. 5 years after the day I was evicted from my own home, I hosted the annual Reclaimed gathering in my living room. 23 people attended, victims who'd survived similar schemes, their families, advocates who'd helped us fight back. Elizabeth brought her famous lemon cake. Robert brought photos of the house he'd gotten back. Margaret brought her new therapy dog, a gentle golden retriever named Justice. As I looked around at these people, survivors all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, complete peace. The house was mine, my life was mine, my future was mine. I'd been stolen from, betrayed, discarded, but I'd fought back, and I'd won. That evening, after everyone had left, I sat in David's old chair, my chair now, and raised a glass of wine to his photo on the mantel. "We did it," I said aloud. "We protected our home, we got justice, and I finally understand what you always tried to teach me, that being kind doesn't mean being weak, that grace and strength aren't opposites, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be a victim." My phone buzzed. A text from Julia. "Dinner next week?" "My treat. You earned it." I smiled, typing back a yes. Another text came through, this one from Natalie, just 2 words. "Love you." I stared at those words for a long time. Then slowly I typed back, "Love you too." Because that was also true. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and pain, despite the years it would take to fully heal, I still loved my daughter. But I love myself more now, enough to set boundaries, enough to demand respect, enough to fight back when threatened, enough to reclaim not just my house, but my power, my dignity, my life. The roses in the garden had bloomed spectacularly that year, better than they had in decades. David would have said it was because I'd finally learned to prune away the dead wood, to protect the healthy growth from what would poison it. He would have been right. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If you feel my words, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. If my story moved you, consider sending a super thanks to help me continue sharing these stories of resilience, justice, and the strength we find in our darkest moments. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back or walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and your perspective matters. Let me know where in the world you're listening from. It means everything to know these stories reach you, wherever you are. If you want more stories about finding courage when you're at your lowest, about demanding justice when systems fail you, about rebuilding after devastating betrayal, subscribe to this channel. There are so many more stories waiting for you. Remember this: you are never too old, too tired, or too wounded to fight for what's yours. Being kind doesn't mean being a doormat, and sometimes the quiet strength of someone underestimated is the most dangerous force in the world. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing in justice. Thank you for being part of this community where every story matters and every voice is heard. Stay strong, stay true, and never let anyone make you feel invisible in your own life. Until the next story.